first obvious question, when did you decide to become a journalist?
Well, I always had a passion and interest reading and writing in regard to sports. Read newspapers, sports magazines. One of these guys who was always intrigued. And then organizationally, as a high school student, I was able to become sports editor of my school paper, editor-in-chief of my school paper, and with the was editor of the yearbook. So I developed this to fruition, I'd say. And then when I went to college, I played football and ran track. Also wrote paper. I had this combination of sports and writing cultivated.
The inspirational figures that you can cite.
Well, I enjoyed many writers at that. You mentioned in introduction, I was the first African of a tribute. Right out of college, I was a high school, and had in the back of my mind that I would like to be a sports writer, but I didn't see the role models, see it as a viable option. So in fact, I up to Chicago, 5 years of teaching, looking next career move. Okay. And a gentleman was named Bill Lowry, who had a television show called Opportunity Line. So he set up a number of interviews for me, job interviews in Chicago at the Trust Bank, the 2 or 3 other places. And I got some offers. I came back to his office. And he said, you don't look all that enthused, what that you're looking for. It was almost difficult for me to get the words out. And I said, I'd really like to be a sports writer. It's not possible, but that's kind of that would be my dream. Well, wait a minute. Made a couple phone calls. Good fortune might have it. They had an opening on the copy desk, sports department. Copy editor, as you know, is a person who writes the headlines for the story, checks for grammatical and factual errors, and is basically the last person who looks at a story before it goes. So I was beaming at that possibility, right? So I was called in for an interview and felt that my background as an English teacher, as a journalist in high school and college, an athlete, coach, all these things, something that might fit. That's how I got my foot in the door. And I tell a lot of young people that, follow your passion first. The rest will unfold for you. So even though this wasn't a dream job at the beginning, because it involved being long hours, weekends, behind the scenes, learning the business. I call it paying your dues, right? And so I did this for maybe 2.5 years. It seemed like a lot longer than that because I said, right? But I tried to make the most of the opportunity that I had in terms of learning the business professionally, how you do things, and it served me well. I said, okay, now you can cover high school sports. There, a couple of years, now you can cover a professional team, Bulls, Cubs, the Bears. How my folded, but it all started with, I guess you'd say, a passion, and then golden opportunity. always tell people, regardless of what passion is, sure you are prepared. If you do get that opportunity, because one and only chance. So I was blessed with the opportunity, and I had the passion, which I knew all along. I just didn't know exactly how to start.
Now, having been the first African American sports writer, how did you deal with the challenges entering the newsroom that was predominant?
Entirely white. Something that I tried not to obsess about, because if you become obsessed with something like that, then take away from your performance. My philosophy that my father, taught me basically was that do your sort of keep your head down, do your job, be responsible, and then good things will eventually happen. There were incidents, and see what I'm saying, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean people aren't out to get you. So I was certainly aware on it, and I received hate mail and death threats. People found out. It's like a lot of times I would write articles without my picture on, people with it. My picture went along. So, as I said, I just tried to do the very best I could. I often said if someone has a problem with the color of my skin, I'll make it their problem and not my problem.
And I think I recall reading that I think you probably recently received hate mail, even to today.
Yeah, every now and then it happens. Not nearly as much, but I don't want to make it my problem. So that issue, that's.
When I was younger, when I was in high school, I used to read sections of the Chicago Tribune as well as the Sun-Times. I recall your byline. So when I had the opportunity to work at the Tribune, it was an immense pleasure. Have any idea how many stories you bylined over your 41-year career?
I have no idea. I just know that I remember when I was Chicago Bulls beat, and I asked that question to the sports editor. And so pretty much every day, something at least one article, and quite often 2 or 3 articles a day. Try to get young people, school-aged people to try to understand what that feels like, so you know what it's like to have a term paper due a certain date, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. Writing for a newspaper is like having theme or term paper due every day, and sometimes it doesn't come to you as quickly. You don't maybe feel like the writing, but editors will tell you, you can't run a blank white space in the papers. So you get into a routine, and not only do you write for that day, but you're constantly thinking ahead. What's the next story after I write this? We joke about newspapers and how it's used to bottom of a bird cage after that one day of looking at it and reading it. So you almost have to think about that in terms of what are you going to do. All next logical question. A player injured, and you're writing about that player, then you're thinking, okay, the next logical, who's going to replace that player? Who are the likely candidates? Man, if a manager or coach is fired, who are the likely candidates for that person? So your mind is constantly working about that next story. But I have no idea how many thousands of highlight stories I have.
Well, my friend, I'll help you.
Okay.
Between 1985 and 1996, you had written 5,729 stories. From 1974 up to 1985, written, and I stopped after 2000. So I imagine that you've written probably over 50,000 stories, not counting the books that you author. That's 12 books. Uh, you co-wrote books with rather legendary people. Billy Williams, for one. You've written a book with Gary Matthews.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So, what motivated you to write?
Well, perhaps in every case, they came to me. And that becomes a great compliment, their trust in me to accurate job. And writing a book is so much different writing a newspaper article in terms of stretching out your thoughts in the newspaper business. We're taught to be as economical with our words, precise possible because of space limitations. But when you write a book, encourage to stretch it out. So something that might be a 600-word newspaper story, now something 6,000-word chapter book, so that you're writing enough to so it was a different discipline. I never took any time off from my Tribune assignments to write a book. A lot of people will say, I want to take a sabbatical, whatever. And I just didn't ever feel that that was right to do. Didn't feel comfortable with that. So I just added that on to my load of newspaper assignments. So for instance, when I wrote a book called Playing Through with Earl and Tiger Woods, 1990s, at that time I was writing a 5-day-a-week column. And at night, home and call Earl Woods, Tiger's father. There's a 2-hour time difference. I would call it 9 o'clock time, 7 there. Talk for almost exactly 2 hours. I would record conversation. Then after recording conversation, I would write, well, first I would transcribe what he said. Then I would turn it into this person for him. Sound like he's. So there's a time element. I traveled out to. Tiger grew up in Cypress, California, Southern California. To Spain for the Ryder Cup, Miami for the golf tournament. So spent a lot of time. You have to gain their trust, because in this case, I had not known Earl. It's over the phone. It involves a lot of listening, asking the right questions, try to
Covered scores of athletes. How would you describe your experience covering Michael Jordan? And would you share, uh, give us a snapshot of your relationship with great Walter Payton?
Well, these are obviously sports icons and people, general society, are really not solely passionate sports fans. Everybody knows a lot about these. I'll start with Walter Payton. I had probably a closer personal relationship. obviously was the all-time leading rusher in the National Football League at the time of his retirement. Right after he retired, I was involved in a number of interests, car racing. He was construction business, and he had this passion to own. I'm the first African owner of an NFL team. But he was also a great prankster, and talked about that. One of the running jokes that we had was the fact that his Super Bowl ring missing. And I was inducted into my college football, or athletic hall of fame, college team. And just by coincidence, my number happened to be just as his famous. So I would tease him. And I said, there was another famous 34 before you came. And he would squeeze my hand. Whenever he shook hands with you, he would just crush your hand. It's so strong. So he would grab my hand and try to rip my ring. So we had this running joke going along with that. But he played a lot of pranks on a lot of his teammates. His best friend, who was literally a dying day, Matt Suey, who was a fullback on the field. One of the jokes that he played on him, training camp in the summer in Platteville, Wisconsin, he stole his expensive watch. He didn't steal it, he hid it, I should say. And Matt Suey was furious, where's my watch? He contacted all these people and thought it was gone. And by the end of training camp, you've been looking for this, So this is the kind of fun relationship. Yeah, there's a number of stories. I wrote a story about that missing Super Bowl ring of his. What happened was, after he retired, he was helping boys basketball team, I believe at Barrington. So he's talking to the young players about the importance of trust. He said, just to exemplify that, so I'm going to give my Super Bowl ring to one of you guys over the weekend. Monday, bring it back to me because I trust you guys. They did that, and the young man went to their basement, or one of their basements, passing the thing around, and all of a sudden it's missing. So sheepishly, this young man had to come back on Monday and said, lost your ring, we don't know. And you can imagine questions were fired. Somebody steal it, somebody trying to sell on eBay. It was insisting, no, I don't know. It's caused a lot of hard feelings. So, missing till the day Walter passed away at 1995. And then in 2001, I got a phone call from a college student at Purdue University in West Lafayette. Said that we found Walter Payton's ring. He said, so, long story short, these kids, high school kids, were in the basement. The ring had fallen through one of the openings of an old sofa that they had. So this other kid who eventually found the ring, Purdue, this family gave them a couch because he needed a couch in his apartment, not knowing that the ring was there, obviously. So at Purdue, this young man's dog was chasing it, takes loose the ring that falls from the. So the young man ends up giving the ring to Walter's widow, Connie. It's almost like this last practical joke from Walter. It's the kind of thing that he would do.
terms of, well, his daughter, incidentally, I believe she's working for WGN.
I think she's Fox.
She's Fox.
Yes, and Garrett is WGN.
Oh.
It's not great.
All right.
They're doing very well. Walter would be very proud of both of them.
Speaking in terms of prankster, I believe that Muhammad Ali pranked you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Manner of speaking, yeah. So, 1998, I think it was, the organization called the Air Auction. They would get famous people to sign either a chair or, in this case, boxing gloves. So, the great Muhammad Ali. And then they would sell them for charity. So, there was just a small group of maybe 6 people going up to Muhammad Ali's estate in Springs, Michigan, and they asked me if I would like to come along, media person. And so we visited, and he had installed a new boxing ring. They proud of. And at this point, the Parkinson's disease that he actually succumbed to was not nearly as bad as it was. So he was able to communicate and certainly understood everything. So he got in the ring to practice ring and invited individually. And he looks over at me and I'm with the media. Garrett? I said, okay, put it that way. So I took my shoes off and got in the ring. We went for about 58 seconds. And someone took a video of it to look on YouTube now. And Google Fred Mitchell sparring with Muhammad Ali. You can laugh at what that was like. I didn't know what to expect when I got in the ring with him. It seemed very intimidating at first. Sparring, shadow boxing, and had a lot of fun with that. And then I wrote an entire story about the experience. He also pranked me. When I was interviewing him off to the side, fall asleep in the middle of the interview. And I says, oh, he does that sometimes. Really? I think and lunges at me. So he was a prankster to the end. Very, very, certainly an icon. I've had the pleasure of interviewing any number of famous people throughout the world. Few of them stick out bigger than life.
Can you name some of the figures whom you find perhaps the most impressive?
Wow, that's a great question. One of the things I tell my students is that everyone has a story to tell. So I don't care if you are famous like Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali, or the so-called, quote, average person on the street. We all have a fascinating, all had to overcome something. Journalists' responsibility, that question. Now, how did that make you feel? To me, that's the most important question. How did that make you feel when you were cut from your junior high basketball team? How did it make you feel, Muhammad Ali, when you won a gold medal in the Olympics and representing your country, come back hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, and are denied access to a restaurant? These are the types of questions that humanize everybody, makes it relatable to everybody. Understand disappointment, elation, challenges. So just about everybody that I try to that level of realization, the fact that everything didn't suddenly great where you're famous and rich. There's a process, humiliation along the way that needs to be talked
I'm going to transition to weeks ago. Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter. Call where you were at the time, and how did you feel?
about. Yeah, I was at home, and my wife actually called me and told me because for 30 seconds, I guess I was not on media. And immediately, I checked as many sources as I could to verify it, because we all, unfortunately, are aware of bogus reports. And that's why it's so important to have several reliable sources to go to. So my, immediate reaction, like everyone else's, is unbelievable, sad. Wanted to know, as a journalist, you wanted the rest of the story. How did this happen? Who else was on board? Because initially, those facts, they reflect that person's life and interaction I may have had with them. Those are the first things.
Fred, I have a litany of questions I can ask you, but I'm going to open it up to the high schoolers as well as the Northwestern mentor. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And when you ask your questions, please identify yourselves and tell us where you're from.
Marcus Anderson, high school. Question that I have is like, what was like the turning point in your life? Like, what was like something that was very hard to kind of become but no.
That's a terrific question. And it's something that sometimes we don't reflect on enough to appreciate how far we. I grew up in the 60s, which was a turbulent time, especially for young men, black men, I would say. 60s, when I was coming out of high school, the Vietnam War was on. So, not go to college right out of high school, projected military draft, most likely going to be drafted and sent over to Vietnam. And I had a lot of my classmates who didn't come back. And it was, tremendous pressure, I would say, on young men at that time to have a plan, to execute that plan. A lot of the civil rights and opportunities are available to minorities now, not really available at that time. My high school in Gary, Indiana, say was my senior class was probably 85% African American, percent Asian, maybe. Then I went to Wittenberg University, which is a small Lutheran college in Ohio. And my freshman year, 8 African American students on the entire dramatic cultural change I had to to, I skipped a grade, so I was only 16 years old. I graduated from high school. So I'm going away from school, going away from home to a totally different environment. It, at that time was not especially accepting. I played football, which helped, but it was rough at times. It shows that you have to adapt circumstances beyond your control best you can, and served me well. It was an opportunity. I remember freshman year, a football player swimming with me who was white, who was from a really small town in Ohio. And he said to me, being just very frank and honest, he said, I've never met a black person before. Television, never interacted. And then I told him about my background, upbringing, and we just kind of stared at each other and laughed. It was a good experience for him, became friends, his family, and it just goes to fortify the notion that so much of prejudice and discrimination is on ignorance, not being around.
Very good question.
My name is Ariana McEntee. I go to Gary Comer College Prep. In an interview with WCIU Sports Edition, you said that you discovered something about yourself. You had to keep busy. What made you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. Probably my wife telling me I need to find something to do. No, I took a buyout from the Chicago Tribune. I was there for 41 and a half years. Pretty good run. And I took months off just to kind of relax and catch myself. And then I said, you know what? I got to have something to do. I got to have reason to get up. And eventually I started teaching again. Actually, taught at Homer for a little bit. Large at fall. Out of Black Hawks writing for their site, writing books. My latest book called History of Loyola Basketball. In fact, on Wednesday, I have a book signing downtown here with Sister Jean. How many of you know who Sister Jean is? Sister Jean is chaplain for the Loyola basketball team, 100 years old. She's an amazing person. So, years ago, Loyola, Final Four, basketball, showed her on television quite a bit on the sideline. Is at every home game, some road games. Gives them advice, both religious advice as well as basketball advice. So anyway, that's my latest book. So I enjoy keeping busy. I mean, I told you about my routine when I was with the Tribune, as far as writing books and writing columns, same time, doing all that. I've always been, as I look back on my life, I was in high school, their age, I was playing football, baseball, running track, editor of the school paper, editor of the yearbook, probably 5 other clubs, Spanish club, all the clubs, council, and I had a part-time job working at a group. And so I kind of developed this work ethic, I guess you could say. Has served me well. So, with our was in college, high school, further in my career, felt it's necessary as long as I'm blessed to have good health to make the most of my life and try to influence people and work with young people, teaching, coaching, advising, mentoring, whatever time allows. But I told you that right out of college, I was a teacher for 5 years and coach. I really enjoyed that. I wanted something else, and I had the good fortune to become a sports writer. I often said that, you know, if there was enough time in the day, I would still teach and coach, be a sports writer, travel all over the world. Like I was, obviously, there's not enough time in the day to do all those at the same time. As much as I can accommodate, even at this point of my life.
So, during your routine, did you ever get tired and unmotivated to keep moving? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, a lot of people in a lot of industries, I guess, like to complain to each other, whether it's teachers or businessmen or journalists. Oh man, I can't believe this and that. And then I would, whenever I would get tired like that, I would say, you know what, I'm really blessed to, I love sports, paying me to be here at this baseball game or football game or basketball game or hockey. They're paying for me to go all over the world. So I would just tell myself, you know what, there's a lot worse things I could be. But did I get tired? Oh, absolutely. A lot of us journalists call it planes, trains, and automobile. So that movie, but everybody has a story to tell about something unfortunate that happened. Flight delays. Probably about 5 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, I was covering a game in Detroit, Northwestern against Michigan. Saturday afternoon game. I had a flight scheduled back from Detroit to Chicago. I think it left at 7 o'clock. Middle of winter. So I write my story quickly, turn my rent-a-car to the rent-a-car place at the airport, rush through security, go to the gate. Sorry, the flight has been canceled. Okay, when's the next flight? 5:30 a.m. So I'm thinking, okay, I've already turned my rent-a-car back in to security, done all this. Not going to go back and check out the, I'm just going to have to sit here at gate 5D and wait several hours until the next flight. That's what I did. So that wasn't very pleasant. So we all have stories like that to go along with.
Question.
Ronald Jackson from Gary Comer College Prep.
Yes.
My question is, how have your life changed since you've been inducted into the Hall of Fame?
So in 1995, I was inducted into Wittenberg's Athletic Hall of Fame. And that was a great honor. You know, whenever something like that happens, you first thought is to want to share that good feeling with your family members or coaches, helped you along the way. My father passed away in 1990, and so my first thought was, he'd be proud. My mother was there, brothers were there, cousins. So I was so happy to share that with them. So you think in terms of what it's meant, it was just your life and to sort of pat yourself on the back, but just sort of appreciate the hard work that you put in getting that recognition, acknowledgement. Sort of tells you that it was well worth the effort.
My name is Trinity. I go to GC Lab School. I'm a sophomore. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming here today to talk to you and hear your story. My question for you is, because I know you guys touched on this in the beginning of the interview. So you're the first African American sports writer at Chicago Tribune. My question is, what do you say to young Black journalists who are entering journalism?
Well, I say the same thing. Black and any minority journalists, as I would say to anybody, that is to prepare and bring whatever unique skill set that you might have based on your experiences, add to the diversity organization. Women, many more women built now than when I first started. Pretty much a rarity. There's also always a need for increased representation of minorities. But as I said earlier, you can't obsess about whatever differences you might have. You need to obsess about how many things you have in common. In the case of sports writing, one of the great unifiers of sport, no matter who you are, you have some common experiences and common interests. Sports, so opportunities are much greater now. Here, as you can be willing to listen and learn. You know, I'm learning to this day. I don't ever get to the point where I say, I know it all, or I've seen it all, heard it all. Particularly in the field of sports, that's what makes it so appealing. The fact that live sporting events, what's going to happen? How people watch. So, journalists, important to always have the feeling of wanting to learn more, do more, wanting to do it better. When I don't think we touched on this, but when I started at the Tribune in 1974, at least that first year, we were still using typewriters. You guys probably don't even know what a typewriter is. So, yeah, there you go. So then, gradually we advanced to this real clunky looking computer. It looked like an old sewing machine that your grandmother might have had. Lugged those around for a while. And then it got down to the sleeker models and what we've got now. So I attribute a great deal of my longevity to the fact that I was willing to adapt to change. A lot of people, particularly as they get older, say, I've always done it this way. Now, me, if there's some technology that can help me do my job better, quicker, efficiently, all in. And so it got to the point where I was in the forefront of a lot of technical advances. It's called me Mr. Gadget. Look at I have a tape recorder, and I have a cell phone, and I have this and that, all these wires. I would have those, and I was arguably the first one, at least in our department, to interview people using cell phone. So I would, so if I'm interviewing him, and ask him questions. Okay, thank you. I go take it back to my computer, pop it into the computer, the video, send it to the Tribune to go along with my story. Now people could read my story and they could watch the interview. And a lot of my colleagues at the time, what are you doing? Believe me, this is coming. And sure enough, now all the reporters are required to do that. And I liked it because I felt like it protected me as a journalist, and it protects the person that you're interviewing. Have this video, because invariably before that, if somebody else wrote a controversial story and it caused an uproar, maybe a player said something that he didn't think was going to blow up really big. The headline writer, who's not the person who writes the story, by the way, copy editor. Well, let's say the headline is some real provocative headline, and the story is not nearly as provocative as the headline. So then you go in the locker room the next day, and the player would say, "Hey, wait a minute, I didn't say that. I didn't mean it that way. Why did you make a big deal out of it?" So if you've got the video, now I can come back to that person. Not only did you say that, here's a video of you saying it, and it's not taken out of context because you can hear me asking you the question, and you can see whether you're smiling or joking or sad. Right? All the expression, everything's right there for you. So that's why I really like the technology part of it. So important.
Question.
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm one of the mentors. What do you feel the role of journalists in regards to Kobe Bryant's passing to sort of balance this larger than life professional persona and all the good that he did for his community and inspiring millions of people versus his not as idealized personal history?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One thing that's prevalent in our society now because of social media, because of all the information out there about our so-called athletic heroes, we know all the warts as well as all the big things. You can't hide from that. It speaks to our society that we like to idolize up on a pedestal and pretend that they're superhuman. They're not. So there's a way to portray these people as human beings. They happen to have super athletic ability. And that's the one thing that I've learned over my many, many years of getting to know these athletes and traveling with them, being on airplanes, getting to know them on a personal level, is that these are just like anybody else. People have the same concerns about their family and marriages and careers, that sort of thing. It so happens that they can play basketball or baseball or football at a superior level. So I think this, as part of the responsibility of journalists, let the general public realize that these people have made mistakes. A lot of times also, I try to make the point that we often forget how young some of these athletes are, and we should try to think about how responsible we were at the age of 21, 22, 23, and what mistakes we might have made if we were millionaires at that age, right? And had all this adulation, everybody coming at you. People can grow and change. Point. And I think if you look at anybody's life, superstar or not, you can pinpoint mistakes that they made, changes in their life that are admirable. So you can phrase it and craft it as a journalist a way to demonstrate someone's progression in life from making a horrible mistake, right? Situation. But he did, later, family man.
Hi, I'm Hector. I'm one of the people here. I just want to know, what would you do if you had the information like TMZ did with that breaking news? Would you have leaked it out just like how they did, or would have you waited before, like, till get Kobe Bryant's family first?
Yeah, I would. There's an urgency in the media business now. Be the very first. Get something out there. And I always say it's more important to be right. If you can be the very first and be right, yes. But it can be terribly embarrassing. It can cost people their jobs. All sorts of problems are wrong. Saw instances, Kobe Bryant situation. One reporter reported that that the whole family was on, right? Imagine that. I mean, that's you can't just say something like that casually without knowing for sure. In fact, Rick Fox, one teammate of Kobe's, was reported by somebody as being on board that helicopter, and he described cheerfully how that impacted his family, friends, just enormous mistake. I think about a story several years ago when someone tweeted William Perry from Clemson University died. Perry was the name of a famous Bears ball player nicknamed the Fridge, William Perry, who also went to Clemson University. So people assumed, okay, the Fridge he's been in poor health, and so it was tweeted out there. So before I retweeted that or tweeted it myself, I called William Perry, the Fridge's agent. I said, "Is this true? Did Fridge pass away?" He said, "No, I talked to him on the phone this morning. He's fine." Long story short, it was William Perry's a fairly common name. So it was another man named William Perry, happened to Clemson University, passed away. So then the person who tweeted that had to tweet out an apology. But just think of how many people were upset and disturbed by an irresponsible tweet like that. That's why it's important to be accurate or fairly being. Speaking of that, your sources of information on a daily basis should be more than one. I've talked to a lot of classes where students say, "Oh, I get all my information on Twitter. That's all I look at." Twitter is great. I look at Twitter all the time, see a lot of stories I haven't seen. It's great. Also, look at other responsible websites to verify. I mean, that was my first instinct when I heard the Kobe Bryant story. This is check CNN.com. Check that website. So that's the thing about being first.
I'm Aaron. I'm a mentor as well. So like,
Yes.
so you mentioned that you always look for a. I was just wondering how that is played out in sport journey. Like, what aspect of athlete's life, aside from their just performance?
Yeah. I found out a long time ago, that particularly when I'm interviewing a young athlete or doing a story or profile, great to go to the mother. Mother will tell you some stories that young man, young woman might not volunteer. Say, "Oh, did you know that blah 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 happened to you?" So mothers are often very, very good at telling that story. I think of one early lesson I learned when I was first at the Tribune when I was covering high school sports, and the sports editor sent me to Kankakee, a story about a high school football player who scored like touchdowns in the first 3 games. Okay, so I go down there and interview the coach and the athletic director and some of the teammates, some of the typical information about him as an athlete. Then I go to his house. suddenly the story flips. Mother, I found out, was only, I think, 13 years old when she had him. She was very young. Single mother, they're poor. Young man, the football player, stolen, would steal food from the corner grocery store and hide it under the bed because he had no food in the house. All of this. So now, all of a sudden, I learned that this is not a story about a football player. Interest story. It's much more important that other people, everybody can relate to, not just high school football fans. About a struggling family and a young man trying to find his way with unbelievable financial challenges. So if I had not, talked to the mother in this case, found that out, then the real story would have been missed. A lot of times, Isaiah Thomas, Hall of Famer, up on the west side of Chicago, and I covered many of his high school games, 70s, I guess. And his mother, Mary, was an incredible person. So stories about how, actually, a movie was made about life. She, at one point, stood on the front porch of their house on the west side with a rifle, chasing away gang members. Her son to a gang. And the stories she told were just, once again, if I had not gone to her to find out the background, and I missed an important part of the stories. It was obvious to everybody that Isaiah was a great basketball player and future Olympian star and Hall of Famer. But there's much, much more from a human.
My name is Delaney. I'm a mentor. I've just been thinking about how you were talking about when you're writing your books, how like you're a full-time journalist, write your books, like very busy and packed. How do you balance like your job and also?
Yeah, it's a very understanding family and wife. With all the travel that I used to do, an incentive was all the miles, the credit for the miles and the hotel stays. So I've got like 1.5 million Hyatt points and almost 1 million miles of travel. So I would tell the family, at the end of the season, we're going to go to Maui. Most of it would be paid for. So that was kind of incentive there. But it does take cooperation, tremendous cooperation. I was just talking to somebody about the fact that our jobs were pretty much 24/7. Heat writer, so late Sunday night, phone call and say, hey, so and so said this on the radio or tweeted this, check it out. Can you make a phone? So you're always on call. If you're covering particularly baseball and unpredictability of the length of a game, rain delays or extra innings, all that, it's difficult to make dinner plans. So you'd say, well, got a 7:30 reservation, hopefully. You always have that eyes over there that extra innings or if there's a rain delay, make other plans. It takes a lot of cooperation.
Yeah, to follow up on that question, like with you being like a journalist and like sports pastor and stuff like that. Question is, how did you manage to your personal and business life like that?
Well, like I said, takes a lot of cooperation. And almost, sort of an understanding that something could happen at any minute. I mean, the advantage of my situation was that I did not have to go into an office and sit behind a desk from 9 to 5. Because of that flexibility. So as long as I got my story, you know, I get the story at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, might get it at 6:30, that sort of thing. So there's flexibility can work both ways. A lot of people don't like the routine of saying, oh, go to the office and be here at a certain time and stay here to, you know, looking at the clock type of thing. As with me, writer, a game. Handling deadlines, that's another whole, have to be prepared. Talked earlier about, so you talked about how many thousands of stories I've written. So you have to be prepared to write on a deadline quickly, which means that you're thinking ahead what you're going to do. And because of the unpredictability of a game that you're covering, you don't know whether the Cubs are going to win or lose, or extra innings. You have to have in your mind, okay, if they win this game, paragraphs, they lose, the other way. You have to be prepared. Sometimes write a story with 20, 25 minutes. Kind of building on their story during the game, what we call the play-by-play. Fifth inning, this happened, tied in the ninth. And then at the end, you know, when the outcome finally becomes available, then
So this came up like while you guys were talking. Before social media, the news that people would get was filtered. Had to okay it through fact checkers and stuff like that. But now with social media like Twitter and Instagram, everything's so like raw and uncensored, and there's not really much filter on news now in social media. So do you think that's question is like, is that a help?
point. That's a very good question. It's an issue. I covered a lot of baseball in the 1980s. That was the quote-unquote steroid era. A lot of players were abusing it. And a lot of the baseball writers were criticized not coming out with this news in the 80s that this was going on. So unless you had somebody admitting it or basically caught red-handed, you could not write that fear of you and your newspaper being sued. Okay? And what we did back then was sort of try to get people to read between the lines. Out. So if we said, well, Sammy Sosa last year finished weighing 177 pounds. Now he's come back to spring training. He's 225 and he's ripped. Immediately people are going to say, well, and he would joke, oh, it was Flintstone vitamins. People could see there's something going on here. Not logical. But so now to get back to your question, now with social media, people can throw out anything without fear of, they can just, if they're wrong, they just apologize. So I apologize about calling you steroid user. Sorry if I offended anybody. But you couldn't do that back then. So a sense of making more work for journalists, a lot of ways social media is difficult to handle because people throw out something that may or may not be true, and the editors will call the beat writer and say, I tweeted that Patrick Kane was in a restaurant, bar, or something. So, and the other thing is that everybody's got a cell phone camera now. A lot of people think that locals in the Michael Jordan era, they like to go out and have a lot of fun. Mischief. Cell phones is handy, and a lot of these guys might have gotten in trouble. And you can go farther back than that, decades back, you know, all these great athletes who were pictured as fun-loving guys and not necessarily doing something that cell phone cameras would have.
My name is Sylvia. I'm also a mentor. You've already mentioned a lot of your really exciting stories that you have to cover mostly later in your career, but I feel like all journalists have that first story that really gets them inspired to continue, like you talk about how difficult journalism is in your career. What was that first story, if you have one, that really inspired you to keep going?
Yeah, that's great. So my very first story, which they gave me a copy of, was a young man named Eli Myers. So when I was in high school, baseball, football, and ran track. So I was on a record-setting 880-yard relay team. Eli Myers was the anchor man. Unbelievable. Ran a same day. He ran a 20 flat, 220-yard dash. Long jump 25, 7, and 3. Tremendous athlete. And so, like I mentioned at the beginning about there not being a lot of opportunities for minorities have now that could have really saved him. So he was not what I would call college material. Went to a college in Texas, small college, lasted for about a semester at steel mills in Gary. So he's the first story that I to his house and told me he had gotten shot, party. He showed me a picture, shirt, and just somebody who should have probably been in the Olympics, also a flanker, a football player. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. That was the first story. Somebody that I knew, somebody I competed with. Sometimes your best stories are stories that have sort of an emotional investment, say, whatever that topic might be. Get that story. How that impacted.
Another question. Closing.
Great questions.
Yesterday, Franklin, currently the senior associate, and I bumped into each other yesterday, and we were discussing you. We were discussing your prolific skills, but there's something that he said that that resonated with me. He said, "As good as you are, or how great you are as a sports writer." He said that you were one of the most down to earth people he's ever met. That said, this should seg into my last question. Now, you've garnered numerous accolades during the course of your life. Who is Fred?
Great question. All of us, we have a limited time. And, the accolades are nice, awards and Hall of Fames. At the end of the day, people are going to say or remember how I made them feel. Whether I made them feel comfortable, respected, liked, appreciated, all these things. That's how I would like to remember. I think there are enough things that happen in our life humble us, realize that we have not achieved anything without the help of others and fortune. Think back, like whether it was having an opportunity to Chicago Tribune, meeting the right people. And I've always said that one of the most underrated and underappreciated skills to have is to have good people skills. And to meet a lot of people in your life who have excellent academic credentials, and maybe work credentials. The question is, how do you interact with other people? How do you treat other people? How do you make them feel appreciated? This is something that I constantly work at, try to let people know that everyone has something to contribute that's very valuable in lives. The experiences that we have, both good and bad, are very important, what we become. So when I look back at my life, you guys are going to incur some jobs. You're going to say, all right, this is miserable. I hate this job. That's for a purpose. Because you're finding out who you are, finding out what you appreciate and what you don't appreciate. And you wouldn't know that unless you experience firsthand and say, hey, I know I don't want to sit behind a desk from 9 to 5, or I know I don't want to be out, whatever it might be. That's part of the experience. I've, been fortunate, I think, to have the perspective to understand why certain things happen to me, why certain doors closed, and why certain doors opened. As you get older, you look back and you think about things. Oh, I've got to have this. I've got to have this happen for me. And you look back later in your life and say, glad that didn't happen. Glad I didn't get what I was asking for back when I was 8 or 19 or whatever. So things, everyone's heard things happen for me. I do believe that. I hope that other people can gain that same appreciation about get the most out of what you have to offer and to be able to appreciate.
That concludes media team session.